Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. I tell you, one of the most important parts of the show today is an interview that I did with Angeliina Lawson. Angeliina Lawson is a trustee on a board in Kansas City for the Johnson County Community College Board. I mean, she's going through hell right now because, of course, she is doing a questioning of the expenditures that they're putting out. I wrote a blog about this, and I had a good friend of mine complain because one of the things that I said when I wrote the blog was that the progressive trustee was attempting to keep the books in order, know where the checks are going, something that conservatives have a tendency to think they have a monopoly on. He took exception because he said, well, the reality is that cheating and stealing and doing these things aren't a politically based thing. It's just what people do. People have learned very well to steal. People have learned very well to be inappropriate. And my response to him really is simple. The truth of the matter is, by definition, what progressive means is doing the right thing. What conservative means is conserving the status quo. And then I ask you, what is the status quo? A progressive stealing, a progressive doing these sort of things, by definition, is not a progressive. So I understand his complaint about it somewhat being a politically biased statement, the way the article is written or the way that Angeliina is talking about these issues. But it is important to note that no one is perfect, but by nature, progressives means moving forward, attempting to make things better. Conservative, by definition, means let's hold on to the status quo. Now, look, if the status quo is working fine and is good, it's doing good, there's nothing wrong with that. But my contention is right now in our current state of society, progressivism or progressiveness is what's needed right now to make things better for us all. But anyhow, before we get into the show specifically, I want to say that today the new polls came out, and it turns out that Bernie Sanders is now really the legitimate front runner with north of 30% of the vote. And in a distant second, we have Bloomberg, who has now overtaken Biden. This is going to be an interesting scenario. The billionaire versus the progressive. The billionaire versus the person who calls themselves a democratic socialist. Who will win? The truth of the matter is, we don't know. Who should win? Well, we know that, right? We want the person who knows what's best for the people. Bloomberg doesn't support Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders support Medicare for all. Medicare for all, by definition, if one does the math, Medicare for all should be the only option on the table. How it's implemented, that is up for debate. But the bottom line is every single American should be covered without having to be asked any questions once they get in for coverage. Healthcare should be a human right. And when people said the costs are going to be astronomical, the cost will be no more. In fact, it will be less than it is right now per capita. And you know why that is the case? Because right now, our system is feeding the wealthy. Our system is designed to use all people that get sick as sources of income, inordinate amount of income for others. I know you have to have people making money for saving lives, people making money for being a doctor, paying their bill. I mean, all of that is, we are not trying to be, not understand how economics must work. But what we have here is different altogether. What we have here is a system that uses us all as forms of transferring all what we have, all what we've made to a few. And we've used just about every sector in the private sector to do that. Look, I don't mind if a car dealer does that. I don't mind if certain parts do that. But when it comes to a humanity, when it comes to illness, when it comes to sickness, that's a different story altogether. So anyhow, that's where the race is breaking down. I want to let you guys know that I'll be doing Politics Done Right and covering the Nevada caucuses when I get after I do the show today, because as it turns out, we will be, or rather, we are gonna be in Vegas. By the time you're watching this, I should be in Vegas, and we will be following the trails. We'll be talking to people. We'll try to bring those of you that are subscribers. We'll try to bring you a little extra things here and there. So if you want, please remember, go to politicsdoneright.com or go to Patreon, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and become a subscriber. You'll get some new features that we are going to put out just for our subscribers as a thank you. Every so often we give our subscribers a teaser. So you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, or you can index to it from politicsdoneright.com. Okay, one other thing that I want to talk about is our progressive candidates. A lot of people are fighting, should we should Warren drop out and let everybody coalesce around Bernie Sanders, or because her numbers are falling? Absolutely not, in my humble opinion. I think we need both Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. While they have overlapping bases, there are certain people around right now that are still much more comfortable with Elizabeth Warren than they are with Bernie Sanders. And we want to hold on to those votes and not have them commit to any other candidate that may not be the progressive candidate that we want. So let's have Elizabeth Warren fighting hard, Bernie Sanders fighting hard. And if for some reason neither one gets the majority, let's make sure that the totality is greater than the necessary amount of delegates, and then we can come to some sort of an agreement at the Democratic DNC in Milwaukee. So no, let's give love to both Elizabeth Warren and love to Bernie Sanders, because we want the entire progressive space. The media, now that it seemed that a lot of people who are fearful jumped to Bloomberg, and the total sort of adds up now to 51% moderate, 48% or so progressive. What we do know is that many of those people that are running on to Bloomberg, running on to Biden, running on to Klobuchar, running on to, what's the other guy's name, Buttigieg, that the reason they're there is out of fear. They really want either Bernie or Elizabeth, but the media is trying to tell folks those two can't win. So they run to the next best choice. Well, what I'm here to tell all our listeners is that Bernie Sanders could win the presidency of the United States, and so could Elizabeth Warren win the presidency of the United States. I think it is time for us to stop thinking about what we can't do and let's start doing. In other words, one can say you can't do something, and the way you solve you can't do something is doing. And the reason I want to end on that point is because Angeliina Lawson is the sole progressive on a conservative school board, and she's been raising hell. In fact, earlier on, she wrote an article after winning her candidacy and getting a new batch of people entitled "Wanting Transparency at JCCC is no radical socialist idea." And I love the way she ended her article. She says, Johnson County residents need to cut through the fear campaign. In other words, there's all kind of fear that, you're going to turn our board into a socialist board if you elect these other people. They have an opportunity on Tuesday to cast votes for JCCC trustees who will be working on the side of transparency, new voices, and new ideas. I've already cast my ballot, and this year I'm proud to say I voted for change. Angeliina Lawson is a member of the Johnson County Community College Board of Trustees and chair of its Human Sources, or was chair of its Human Sources Resources Committee. Folks, we have to be active progressively at every single level, not only those that have the big names like president and senator and congressperson, etc. We have to be everywhere, because a lot of things don't happen on that level that I just mentioned. A lot of things happen on the level where our the person that I'm interviewing next is at. Angeliina Lawson, this is her article. Check it out. I actually linked to it in the blog post for her story. Consider going ahead and reading it. But anyhow, without further ado, why don't we go ahead and talk to Angeliina Lawson. Welcome to one more edition of Politics and Right. I'm Egberto Willis, your host. Thank you so kindly for being with us. Today we have a special guest. We have a warrior, somebody who's out. You know, you always have politicians talk about, we are here for the people. Well, folks, Angeliina Lawson is here for the people. Angeliina Lawson, welcome aboard to Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much. I love catching up with you. I've enjoyed your podcast, and I look forward to answering questions.
Absolutely. So, Angeliina is the trustee with the Johnson County Community College Board. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're also the chair of its Human Resources Committee?
They actually changed the committee structure, and what's been going on, I've been stripped of those committees and stripped of the liaison positions without my due process. And that is something that has been because I have been working on behalf of constituents to gain transparency and asking questions. And so that is something that has been very difficult to keep moving forward and let people understand the importance of asking questions and making sure that the taxpayers and residents of Johnson County have the option to understand where their money is going.
You know, it's so important because it's interesting. You are likely the sole progressive on that board right now. Am I correct? Or
correct?
And,
yeah,
but you
definitely look that way.
But you got elected. You got elected on those terms for that board. Now, Angeliina, in August of last year, you wrote an article titled "Wanton Transparency of JCC is no radical socialist agenda." So it seems like as you got onto that board, you were always trying to find a way to ensure that the people in your community understood where their dollars were going. That used to be a conservative thing. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that article and why you wrote it?
Yeah, well, I started looking into better ways to provide more services, more transparency, of course, and better wages for our workers on campus. A lot of those discussions caused me to rethink the way in which something like college funds itself and how we spend the money. The process to getting information, the access, the ability to have input into the discussion, to understand how decisions are made, and getting the substantial documentation that shows how staff have come to these numbers surprisingly has become a very difficult task. And right now it's pretty much outright ignored and denied in public meetings, dismissed, mocked, and emails that I send in are then used in ways to further punishment, further enable the freedom of speech to be able to discuss things and get understanding of what are the state statutes, what are the ways where trustees have an opportunity to get the answers for constituents. And that process has led me to write several different articles to explore the struggle that our constituents are having in just getting answers.
Now, an incident occurred recently. I think it began in November, where it's led up to a potential censure of you sometime in February. Why don't you detail that incident?
Sure. So this is what I understand. So if I reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'm trying to find something out for constituents, I do it because I feel as though they deserve an answer. If I don't do that, then what kind of representative would I be? So progressives can't be about words. We have to be about actions. And I remember when Reverend Barber came here, once he said, if you aren't willing to take the big risk and can't be on the stage, then you can't be on the stage. And so while I don't need to be on the stage, I took the big risks because I felt as though morally there was no other choice but to say, we need to get answers and understanding of what is going on here at the college, and reaching out to a couple state legislators to understand the state statutes, understand the local control as to how we can implement better understanding that gives us the ability to get those answers so that administration can't decide to interpret that state statute differently. And in the end, that in confidence that private email that I composed from constituent information. Staff had provided me information. Staff in confidence had provided me information. That ended up becoming a witch hunt in the boardroom that was extremely political. Some people call it a Soviet show trial of like, did you write it? Did you write it? Did you write it? And that kind of mentality really has stunned me. It's gotten to the point that there's such outright arrogance and confidence of their what they can do, of making up the rules, of ignoring just outright civility. It's become a power vacuum where if the board is not managing power dynamics within the structure and they work in conjunction with administration, it becomes very difficult for somebody who is trying to seek answers, asking about certain reserve amounts, assets, that constituents are asking questions.
Let me tell you what I'm going to do is I cut out a piece of the video out of that showed the interaction with you trying to show and get where this money is going, where this money is, what makes up all this money, and show the runaround that you got in the board meeting.
With that, I'm ready to move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? The consent agenda is a portion of the meeting where routine business is considered. It's business that has been considered by the administration and committees. They are usually consensus items that are acted on collectively and approved in a single motion vote. Any member of the board may request that a particular item be removed from the consent agenda and considered, debated, and voted upon separately. Are there any items anybody would like to pull from the consent agenda tonight? Trustee Lawson.
The cash disbursement summary on page 50 and 51.
Anything else? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda except for the cash disbursement summary on pages 50 and 51?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Trustee Cross, seconded by Trustee Snyder to approve the consent agenda as published with the exception of the cash disbursement summary on pages 50 and 51. Is there any discussion?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. There's also, I think, the minutes. Yes, I'd like to pull the minutes as well.
You want to pull the minutes from the December 12 meeting?
The minutes aren't labeled, so I don't know. But yes, that's what whatever was.
They don't have a page number, but the minutes of the meeting from December 12 are part of our packet. Do you want to pull those as well?
That's correct.
Does the mover and the seconder agree to approve every item except the cash disbursement in the minutes?
It's fine. Yes.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor of approving the consent agenda except for cash disbursement and the minutes signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, no. That motion carries unanimously. Let's start with the cash disbursement summary on pages 50 and 51. Trustee Lawson.
Okay, so I had submitted an email to you, Mr. Chair, and the President asking for the labeling of these control numbers. I think it's in the best interest of the people to be able to know what these items are. It's hard for me to read number, so I don't know what the amounts. Some of them are 1.4 million, 854,000, 1.3 million. And I think it's just something that maybe I asked to have that presented, and I have not received that for tonight. And so I don't know, as a board, how can we vote on this if we don't know what we're voting on?
As you know from our communications, I've discussed that with President Sopcich, and we've agreed that will be reviewed or delegated to the management committee. This is the form that has been in place for at least 5 years. It was partially in place because of security concerns and not identifying individuals who are receiving checks with their accounts or otherwise. It is vetted by our expenditure policies. The budget items are approved by the budget, and our professional staff presents these for approval for reasons I'm really not sure of, because I think they've already been approved. But we will let the management committee take a look at that and see if that's something that we should have been concerned about for the last 5 years that was just raised this week.
Well, I have the option to raise questions when the board packet is released, and this is a constituent who asked me for the labeling of these, and I asked to have them available for this vote. Do you have those available?
They're not going to be presented tonight. The consent agenda is presented as the agenda was published. and we will vote on it as published. I don't have any reason to believe this is any different than what has happened for the last 5 years, including the last 2 years that you have received the packets and voted on them. These have been approved by staff. If you want confirmation from staff, I'm sure they will give it.
That's what I asked for, so you're saying I don't have it for this vote?
You do not.
So when I make requests, when we get the board packet, what does that matter?
When you make requests after the board packet has been published, and it is within the authority of a committee, we send it to that committee. When it has been a practice of the board for 5 years, I don't intend to stop the practice of approving these expenditures at this point unless a majority of the board agrees that now we need to not approve these tonight and wait for further review. It is also part of our packet review that is going on that deals with the security of vendors, personal information of individuals, and otherwise. So I do not intend to hold this up tonight, and it will go to the management committee in the February meeting.
So when I asked, I mean, staff could also come to me if there's issues with confidentiality on these items, or we can go to an executive session and look at these things. But I'm not allowed to see what these are before I vote on this.
We will review that. The management committee will review that and see if any policy change is required. For tonight, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve it as it's been presented for the last 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by
Mr. Chair.
Snyder, just a second. I want to get this for the record. Moved by trustee Snyder, seconded by trustee Cross. Dr. Cook for discussion.
Well, I think it's a fair question in terms of some of these big amounts. I would say, though, that all of these items have been pre-approved in the budget process and previous actions. So I guess to look at $1.4 million and $1.3 million, just to be reminded what they're for, is a reasonable request. But to go through each one to say who does this go to, that's a detail that I think we just have to expect the process to work. And we have an internal auditor, an external auditor, and we have several steps in place to find fraud. And I'm pleased to say that this college has been very clean in that regard. But I still also think that, hey, if we wrote a check for $1.4 million to one account, unless that was several pieces of that account, then it's reasonable to know what it was.
If there are individual questions about those, they can be referred to Ms. Lears, and I'm sure.
Well, I would think that we would do that before the board meeting.
Well, so when you look at the 1.4, for example, on dated 12/6, its ranges from 37,921 to ranges 37,927.
So there are several.
So there are multiple. That's a group. So that reflects the ranges for that amount. Those are not individual amounts, and those are provided as supplemental A, and supplemental A is requestable by. But we'd like to, at the management committee, be able to present on this because it's part of our security concerns. Some checks historically have had personable identifiable. We've had social security numbers on checks based on government requests in the past, and so putting it public would be a FERPA violation. I can say FERPA now because we already defined it earlier.
Mr. Chair, I'm not suggesting we change anything, but I am saying that any trustee that has a question about that, it's proper to go to the president's office before the board meeting or and get direction as to where to go, which I've done, and not play gotcha at a board meeting. And so that question is fair to ask, but there's a way to do it. And
My request was submitted within the time frame, but I'm not given the information to be able to take this vote, so I will be a no.
Okay. Any other discussion? Not all in favor of approving the cash disbursement summary as presented in the consent agenda signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, say no.
No.
6-1. Trustee Lawson is no. We now have the minutes to the December 12 board meeting, which are not numbered and are included as a separate attachment to your packet when you receive it. Is there an addition or correction to the minutes, Trustee Lawson?
I would be helpful to have page numbers on it. I don't know how to let you guys know what page I'm on.
Right. The page numbers are at the top, in the internal, up at the top left.
The minutes are blank.
Upper left, it says page 2 and then page 3. It's not numbered in our packet, but it's numbered on the minutes.
The minutes are attached as an attachment, just like the president's report.
Should go to attachments.
See up here? Is that what you printed off?
No, I printed the ones that the public gets.
Okay. Can you tell us what the start of the
Or,
page is?
is this the minute? I don't know if this is the minutes of the transcripts. I have no idea. I
Well,
think
the minutes
it's,
start with minutes of the meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Johnson County
Okay.
Community College.
And the minutes for December are not posted yet. They have to be approved by the board first.
okay, so transcript, is that the same as something with the minutes of the previous?
For the purpose of the public, our meetings are recorded electronically, and that is posted on the website a few days after the meeting. In addition, our staff prepares a hopefully close to verbatim transcript, but not always verbatim because we don't speak into the microphone and other things. I think what you're referring to is the transcript that can be printed off on the website under About JCC Trustees, under Leadership and Governance, under Board of Trustees, and then under the tab Recordings and Transcripts. If that's what you're asking about, can we go ahead and approve the minutes of the meeting?
Well, I need to be able to add my vote no on the board leadership. So I don't know what page this is, but I need that to be added for the December board meeting.
All right, on page 5 of the minutes as attached to our packet, there's a report of the nominating committee, and it says, following discussion upon motion by Mr. Musil, seconded by Mr. Lindstrom, which motion unanimously carried, the Board of Trustees, oh, that's the tabling motion. Let's get back to, okay, on page 8 of the minutes, following discussion upon motion by Dr. Cook, seconded by Mr. Cross, it is a recommendation of the nominating committee that the Board of Trustees approve the 2020 slate of officers, committee and liaison assignments as amended.
So I would just want to record that I said no, and I think the volume was turned down.
Okay, so the reflection in the December 12, 2019 minutes on page 8 should reflect that the recommendation was adopted on a 6-to-1 vote with Trustee Lawson voting no.
That's correct.
Everybody understand that correction?
I move we approve the December minutes with that correction.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Snyder, seconded by Trustee Smith Everett, that we approve the December 12, 2019 minutes with the correction as indicated on page 8. Any further discussion?
It's Trustee Ingram, unless she said it too. Did she say it as
Oh,
well?
did you second it? Or did
I
Trustee-
was trying to, but
I-
she did. It's fine.
You gotta speak up. I heard her.
We
I thought
sound a lot
Trustee
alike.
Smith Everett did that. Okay. All in favor of that motion signify by saying yes.
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 Opposed, no. That carries unanimously. That concludes the consent agenda. We have no executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Moved by Trustee Cross, seconded by Trustee Ingram. Not debatable. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for staying.
But I know you probably can't go into specific details given that this is under litigation right now, I imagine, at the school. But what in that letter that you wrote to the legislature could somehow make it that you did something wrong when what you were trying to do is get answers? How is that possible?
It's not. There was nothing confidential in that letter. It was criticism of the college, which I have, and I've been outright spoken about that criticism. Every information that was given to me from constituents who've had interviews or conversations, those numbers were generated by staff. I have no way to generate numbers. So everything in that email that was told to me by staff, there was nothing confidential. All of that information is either out in the public already. So there was no surprise that that I was asking these questions to state legislators to get more understanding of my local control power, but to they used it in a way of a political gain that they wanted to use in retaliation. And they felt that this was their, approach to do it. And they disseminated this information without the board ever even having a chance to look at it. So the way that they sat on it for a month and a half, being so concerned about it, when I wrote into the chair, when I saw it come forward, stating, this is me, let's have a meeting, let's do an executive session, or if you're going to do it in the public, let me present the issue. They took it a completely different way, emailed all the donors, the award recipients, all the colleges in our state, their president's board, national organ. They did all of that before we even had a discussion on it.
And what were they telling all these people that was of concern?
Oh, they were saying, oh, look at this, this is so much damage that's being done to us. And I looking at them going, you are literally causing this damage. And this was a private email that was in confidence between me and a state legislator or legislators that I was seeking information about and letting them know my concerns.
About that particular college system.
Yes. Yeah.
And what they attempted to do is promote what you were trying to find out about JCCC onto the entire college system as if you were somebody trying to create an issue for them. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. They created damage and then pointing the finger and saying, you wrote the email, you are guilty of all this damage that we created. And when I look at the questions that they were asking the wrong questions. They needed to be asking who authorized the dissemination of that letter of sensitive material when it was a private email. And that is something where someone looked at that email, saw the sensitivity, and clicked enter, and it went out. And that is someone who's not being held accountable, who's being sheltered, who is, rounding the wagons around. And I think there's too much of a political grudge or vendetta, retaliation, that it's gotten to the point of just unfathomable ridiculousness, where I have lawyers that are, using their positions to further harm abuse. It's just, what did I stumble upon here?
Right. Well, actually, that is a magical issue. We're speaking to Angeliina Lawson, who is a trustee for the Johnson County Community College Board in Kansas City, Kansas. Did I get that right this time?
Johnson County, Kansas. Yep.
Yeah, Johnson County, Kansas. And she is one of the warriors out there trying to make sure that money is spent wisely, make sure that people are, that the community understand where their dollars are going, and to make sure there isn't some sort of good old boy network that's throwing monies from the college system that all the taxpayers are paying for throughout to their good old buddies. And Angeliina, I know you can't go into detail, but what kind of sensitive information would we be talking about? Just kind of an approximation.
Nothing. I mean, everything is already out in public documentations. Nothing's been confidential. The information that has been given to me is either information that was generated by staff. Nothing has been made up. I have no way to generate information. So I have collected over time things that constituents have received, things that I personally, times when I have interacted with staff, and compiled all of that information to be able to explain the concerns that I have, the difficulty of getting the information, and the retaliation that I'm having because of these questions that I'm trying to seek answers for the people and to do my job.
I think it is clear that, first of all, that they know that there's really no recourse against you as somebody trying to find out. But I think their expectation is probably to intimidate you with the expectation that you won't continue or try to dig into exactly what's going on at that community college.
Absolutely. The intimidation has started from the very beginning. That was a meeting that I had between the chair and the president that I was pulled in to tell me how to behave and tell me.
What do you mean by tell you how to behave?
that I was asking for a draft agenda of I was the chair of a committee, and I was asking to see that draft agenda. And because I asked for that draft agenda, it started a phone call late at night that required that I show up at the next day to a hotel where the chair and the president were going to tell me how trustees behave. And that was the length of the call. And since
At a
then,
hotel.
Yep.
Why not on JCC property?
I'd like to know that too. Yep. So there's a lot of ways that certain people have acted out of privilege, out of power, and they are using that in a way that's unequal to the rest of the members of the board. There's a lot of intimidation, harassment, retaliation, simply because I would like to answer the questions that constituents are having.
Now, I've seen elsewhere where you've wanted to find out why monies were going out of state for particular agencies. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I try to have a habit when we look at our requests for proposals. Those are the RFP bids for any business that wants to be able to have an option to be used as a vendor. And I look at the Human Rights Campaign corporate index, and that is a good way for me to gauge whether a company is rated 100 on, there's a survey that goes out. They also are graded whether they participate at the federal level and sponsor federal bills for protection of LGBT community members, how well they welcome LGBT community members into events for their company or their own structure, the non-discrimination policies. There's a litany of different items that they have to go through, and I check on that. And I want to make sure that our transgender faculty and students have that knowledge that we are protecting and watching out for them. So when I looked at one of the companies, they had a very low rating, very low, one of the lowest I've seen. And I was concerned immediately that this is something that we should probably look at because it's against our non-discrimination policy. So I brought it up and asked the question, is this company the same one in Atlanta, Georgia? There was a little bit of kerfuffle, and we waited. And when I explained why, I brought out the article from the Atlanta Journal, I can't remember the newspaper for it, that stated what was going on with this paper company and why there was such an issue with their rating and the concerns that LGBT members were coming forward and saying that the practices of the company. I wanted to find out if that indeed was the same company. It turns out yes. And so I voted against that contract because it was not in line with our policy. So that scenario caused the VP of Finance at some point to make a statement in a boardroom that stated, because I asked these questions, instead of just knowing that we have a department for that was such an offensive statement. Literally everything you just heard and the questions that I had about it, then that has repeatedly come up in different board meetings as examples of me getting into the weeds. And yet when I ask questions, they're all usually on point about job duty, contracts. I get better contracts for the college. I make sure that we use the money appropriately. And right now we're under a presidential search. And when we were looking at the search firm, I asked about the 1/3 salary that they would get for commission off the first year. Well, if we don't set a pay range because we have a lot of reserves, there are a concern around that anybody can come in and say, well, I want to be a president for $600,000 or $1 million. 1/3 of that first year goes to the commission. Okay, so as I was asking questions about it, in the end, that firm came back and gave a flat rate of 92 or 95,000. That is a savings that my questions were bringing to the constituents. And these are the questions that have made better deals for us.
I mean, that is important, and you would think that it's cherished, but I think what you've run into, Angeliina, is the good old boy network where wheels get greased. And there's quite a bit that you probably are not immediately privy to. and their expectation is that they can tarnish you. But unfortunately, they have at least 2 more years to deal with you. At least 2 more years. And my contention, I hope, I expect that in building a presence and building a movement, that not only we have you back in 2023, but that we bring more folk like you who are going to get in there, because I think it is essential that you get the word out of what the Good Old Boy Network is doing, supposedly under these guys that are supposed to be conservative and watching your monies. We have the progressive come in there to make sure that things are run right. I think it is essential that we get the word out. I think it is essential that you participate in making sure you continue doing what you're doing and finding out exactly what these people are doing. I mean, if I had a title to give it out, I would give it timidity, or rather intimidation versus potential corruption. And I only put potential corruption for legal reasons, but we know what's there.
Right. Well, Egberto, I'm going to keep asking questions because it matters. It matters a lot. And if our college does have too much funding, which it can happen, why don't we invest that in students or better staff?
You jumped the last question that I had for you. And the last question that I had for you is, according to your write-ins, the university, the college system is supposed to keep about 25% in reserve. They're all the way up to 50%. Your contention is, why not? People are overburdened with high taxes right now, in high property taxes, but then you also brought another concern. Is there a way that overburden can also be placed to help students that are coming into the system? Tell us a little bit about that.
Now, I just finished a great meeting with constituents today, going over my budget guidelines for the college that I want to turn in. And it was filled with really good recommendations on being able to look at how much revenue we have, how much we spend, looking at a percentage, a formula. So it's not just throwing chicken bones in the middle of the room, deciding, which way we're going to go based on the tea leaves. There's an actual strategic way of looking at this so that it makes sense to people and it's explainable for people to go back and say, I have a question about this sentence here. But there's also concerns around, if you have low enrollment that everyone in the country is talking about, how are you encouraging that enrollment seats? And I think about when I go to different department stores, I look at the sale bin. Well, why don't we have a sale on tuition? And if this
exactly
to get people to finish the last 3 units, credit units, to get their diploma or degree or certification. But I'm also noticing people that when we are in good economic times, that means people have more money. And that also means that we are looking at people who might want a pay raise. If we can offer one class, come back and get that pay raise, they are able to bring more income into our county. And that is something that benefits everybody. So increasing enrollment, making sure that what we're spending is within line, that everyone that we're looking to make sure to, like, we have a trash policy right now that went up from 25,000 to 50. Well, what are we throwing away that's $50,000? That's can I go to that bin? Because I know the Census Bureau has a tax, kind of a trash day. Well, maybe there might be something that students might be able to bring back, or computers. What are we throwing away? This kind of transparency is essential to building the trust and the reputation, the reliability, where trustees matter. Instead of just being ornaments, we actually have a purpose. And I think that would be good.
Angeliina Lawson, Johnson County Community College trustee, hero, and transparency warrior. Thank you so kindly for having appeared on Politics Done Right, Angeliina, and keep up that fight.
Thank you, Roberto. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and we will be back with you mañana. But it is important that we all stay in the game no matter what. It is important that we get the job done. Progressives can get the job done if we just engage unabashedly, fearlessly, and do what we know has to get done. Folks, please go to politicsdoneright.com and support the program. My name is Egberto Willies, and you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!